In this video I am going to show you how to do this report. Okay, so a report that shows the cleaners who are supervised by Doc and the cleaners who are supervised by Tipp should be grouped by supervisor, displaying supervisor and cleaner details. It should also calculate and display the number of cleaners per supervisor and the overall number of cleaners. Okay, now as with everything, or as with most things, it's actually a lot easier to do things if we do them from using the wizards from the queries and the tables. So I'm actually going to create a query that is going to show us all the cleaners and supervisors. So I've done the supervisor table and the cleaner table, and I'm going to drop and drag all of the things in here. Okay, so I'm just going to literally take every single thing that I need. I haven't taken the supervisor ID from the cleaner table. That's really not necessary. Okay, so that should be everything from there that I need. So now when I run that, it shows me the supervisor and then the all of the details for the people. Now I only actually want to have Doc and Tipp, who are number 1 and who are number 5. So in my design view, I'm going to change the supervisor ID to show me 1 or 5, so that when I run it now, I've only got 1 and 5. I've only got Tipp and Doc. So I'm now going to Control S and save this as query, and I'm just going to call it Doc Tipp cleaners. Okay, so you may be thinking, what was the point in doing that? Well, the point in doing that now is the fact that I can use the report wizard and find the Doc Tipp cleaners query, take all of the information from there, and it automatically groups it. So remember, it said I wanted it grouped according to supervisor. So I want the supervisor bit at the top, the cleaner bit at the bottom, and I'm just going to keep going with next, 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 and finish. So this is what it looks like. It looks like table supervisors. I messed that up. I should have changed the name with that, but I've also got some headers and things which I can't quite see. So I need to make sure that I have enlarged all of those things and that I can see all of those things under there. So I'm going to close my print preview and go into my view. Now this is a little bit tricky. Let's just change that supervisor table bit. What am I going to call this? Doc and Tips cleaners. Okay, so as you can see here, let's expand this so I get a decent sized page. I've got quite a lot of things that I can't quite see. So in the page header, that was the bit that you could see essentially at the top of the page. So these are quite important, because if you can't see everything in there, then you won't be able to see what is the header at the top of the page. These bits here are where the details are actually being displayed. So if we try and make those boxes at the top and the boxes at the bottom approximately the same, and try and align them so that they're in the same space, so the supervisor at the top will then have the supervisor's name displayed underneath it. So obviously the label needs to be completely visible. When I do this, I'm going to expand this quite a bit. Okay, when I go into there, you'll see why, because I need to be able to see all of that bit here. You'll notice I can't actually see all of the names, so I might actually spend some time moving this along, and trying to expand this a little bit more. Okay, oh, we're almost there. It really is a little bit fiddly, but you kind of get used to it in the end. Now my headers don't quite match, so I'm going to take these and move these along so that I've got a little bit more space in my header thing. This is just making it pretty, really. It doesn't actually add any marks to what you're doing. Right, so my supervisor email label at the top needs to kind of match up with my supervisor bit in there. Okay, I've got another cleaner email here, which again is going to need to be really quite long. So I want to make sure in my view that I can see all of the cleaner email. Now you'll see that all of these tabs now aren't lining up with where these are meant to be. So now that that's perfectly long enough, I can slide that along and potentially shuffle from the other end. So I'll maybe make my page a little bit longer and then take my cleaner email right over to the end of that page. Okay, gender seems to be okay. Telephone number can probably get away with being a wee bit shorter. Cleaner surname, and then cleaner name, cleaner ID. Okay, now it looks like I'm sort of backing up slightly on this one. I can have this box longer, but I can't really have that one much shorter than it already is. Okay. So that's probably about as far across as I can get that to go. Right, let's see what we're looking like so far. So yeah, it's not looking too bad. I've got a little bit of misplacement now. I seem to have lost my cleaner ID altogether. So this seems to be being overlapped. I'll maybe move that across. I can now see my cleaner ID appearing there, which is quite good. You just need to kind of fiddle around a bit. And just try and line them up as much as is physically possible. So I try and get that one on the line where that one is. My cleaner surname clicked onto there. My telephone clicks into there. Agenda kind of goes about there, and then cleaner email. Right, let's have a look at what that looks like. Okay, I can't quite see all of the telephone number, but actually I can move the telephone numbers up. I still can't see the E on surname, although this looks like it's fitting all quite nicely. Right, so there we go. Can't quite see the E on surname. Telephone number does need to be a wee bit longer. That looks like it's going into the gender. Cleaner surname can be a bit shorter. And there we have it. That looks something that looks pretty reasonable. So here I've got my header. If we look at what it looks like here and look at what it looks like in our design view. So doc and tip cleaners is the bit that's in our report header. Then all of our page header settings are all of these headers up here. And then in the next section, you've got the supervisor headers. So although this says supervisor header, that is the box. So these are the labels and this is the box with the information in it. And then in the detail, those are the boxes with all of the information in it. The page footer down here is basically just that bit there that is displaying your date down here, and then the page 1 of 1. Okay, we can change the report to landscape so that it will fit quite nicely on one page. Okay, so there I'm just in a page setup. Okay, so let's go back to our design view. Obviously, we've been asked to do a couple more things on this. So essentially, we want to have a section which counts how many cleaners are in the supervisor ID bit, and we also want to know how many cleaners there are altogether. Think about where you want that to be. Okay, essentially I think it would be quite nice if there was a potentially a count maybe round about here. Okay, so it counted all of those things, all of those people there, and then counts all of those people there. And then maybe a count bit before the bottom footer section in there. So in my design view, that means that I have to enlarge some of these little bits in here. Okay, so bearing in mind that I wanted the count to come potentially at the end of all of that information, that's when I need to use a text box, and there we go, there's a text box, and put in my count section in here. So inside my text box, I'm thinking about what I want it to say. So total for supervisor might be quite good. And in here is when I actually put in the formula that I want to use. So I want to use an equals. I want to tell it that I want it to count something. And then I'm going to use a set of curly brackets. Okay. Within there, I'm now going to tell it what I want it to count. So essentially, I want it to count in square brackets how many times the supervisor ID appears. Now that sounds a little bit strange, because you'd think I'd be counting the cleaners. If I was going to be counting the cleaners, it would just say 1, 1, 1, 1, 1, because each cleaner is only appearing once. So you're thinking about what it looks like in your query. How many times did doc appear? So doc appeared every time there was a new cleaner attached to doc. Okay. So if we have a look at what that says now, now I've got a little bit of a problem because it's given me a total for supervisor all the way through, which is not really what I wanted it to do. Okay, so I essentially wanted that to happen in as a potentially as a little break. So I think what I've done is I've put it in the wrong place. Okay, so just going to fix that a little minute. Okay, so we need to go back into our design view and actually move this. It looks like we can't actually move it out of here, which means I'm going to have to delete that text box from there and then do that bit again. Okay, so you can slide around each of these to give you the sort of gaps that you need. So let's make this supervisor header a little bit bigger and then put the text box in there instead. Okay, so I'm going to call it exactly the same. Total for supervisor. Okay, so it's equals count. What do we want it to count? Curly bracket. Okay, the square bracket. So the square bracket is the way of being able to tell it to look at a particular heading. So supervisor ID. So always end that with the square brackets and then finish your formula with the curly brackets. So the curly brackets formulas are the same in nearly all Microsoft pieces of software. So whether you're using databases, whether you're using some sort of programming language, whether you're using formulas in Excel, okay, they all kind of work in the same way. I want to do that. I wanted to actually shorten the box, not that. There we go. Okay, so let's have a look and see whether that's right. So we've got 9 for this supervisor and 16 for this 7 for this supervisor, which is exactly right. So essentially, if you counted them all, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, that's correct. And then 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, that's correct. So now we want a total at the bottom. So we've got a report footer in here. There's a page footer and a report footer. I'm going to put the total. So it was the total number of cleaners, and again I'm going to use a text box to do that. Okay, so this is now going to be equals count. And this time I am going to use a wildcard. Okay, so an asterisk counts as a wildcard, which means it should count everything. Which means it should technically add together the total for the supervisors. But really it just counts how many sort of separate records that there are. So it's a way of counting how many records. And we'll maybe put that as a grand total at the bottom. Let's scoosh that along in there. Let's see what that looks like. Okay, scroll down. That looks very nice, 16. So 16 things in total. And that, ladies and gents, should be a pretty good report that's been requested. So remember that we wanted just the doc and tips. So we've just got doc and tip. We wanted them sorted by the supervisor, and we wanted all the cleaner details in there. So of course reports are the sorts of things that bosses will use, and they can use them in whatever way really that they wanted to use it. Okay, so if we close that, asks us do we want to save. That's absolutely fine. So the only thing really that we messed up with is not calling it something that was suitable down here. Okay, so we use RPT for reports, and it is not supervisors, it's just our doc and tip report. Okay, so there we go, we fixed that little error as well.